Let me start with the news from overnight, of course. This is surprising to some election of a Democrat as a senator, Doug Jones, coming from the state of Alabama. How does that affect your life as a Republican senator?
I think it doesn't only affect my life as a Republican senator, but there's 51 of us now, and or at least there will be after the first year, 51. And we have to consider, do we want to govern or not govern? Do we want to be in the majority or not be in the majority? And elections are supposed to have consequences. We ran on a platform, not exactly the president's platform, but he ran on a platform. And I believe strongly that a platform isn't something you just stand on, it's something you serve on. And so we have to continue to try to deliver. And with just 51 members, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But everybody's got to decide, are we going to pull together, or would we rather be in the minority? Or would we, in the process, not keeping our promises to the voters of the United States?
So let's unpack that a little bit. Start with the tax legislation. You are on the Finance Committee. I know you're very active in that. Is it essentially too late in your estimate for this to really change that? Or another way to put it, are you going to get a new bill to the president that will be jointly from the House and the Senate in time for him to sign it before Doug Jones takes office?
A week from today or a week from tomorrow, maybe as late as Friday. We'll have it through both houses of Congress and to the President of the United States, and we'll have the votes to get it through the United States Senate.
So then that raises questions when you talk about governing of other issues coming up. Things like continuing resolutions, budget resolutions, the debt ceiling. Does the election of Doug Jones make the Republican caucus more bipartisan? Does it say we need to reach across the aisle now and work with them? Or do you double down on the approach of really we're going to do this with our slim and even slimmer majority?
When you get right down to the nuts and bolts, it's difficult for me to see one senator making that sort of a difference. But it does bring me back to something that the Senate is all about, reaching across the lines. Now, when you have reconciliation, you only need to pass a tax bill with 51 votes. That's a rare exception. Maybe 1 or 2% of the work of the United States Senate is conducted that way. So when you have to have 60 votes, you have to have bipartisanship or nothing gets done. Now, it can be done. In my Judiciary Committee in 15 and 16, we voted out 31 bills. They were all bipartisan, and 18 of them got to a Democrat president. So it can happen. The trouble is the people only read about conflict in Congress because that's the way journalists operate. When people are getting along, you never read about it.
It's a fair point, sir, and you're welcome to come back on anytime you want to really talk about something you've all gotten along. But to give me a sense of where you might get along, for example, on the deferred action situation, the DACA situation, is that something where the Republicans could go along with the Democrats? On some of the funding for some of the health care issues that Susan Collins, your colleague, is very concerned about, are those areas that could be areas for compromise with the Democrats?
Absolutely. For instance, we got a Republican president, wants DACA to pass. You got Republicans, vast majority of the Republicans want it to happen. All the Democrats want it to happen. So you got to get 60 votes. Democrats have things they want. Republicans have things we want. It's as simple as sitting down with me and Senator Durbin, sitting down and reaching an agreement, very similar to where I was on the extreme right, he was on the extreme left on criminal justice reform, but we got together on a bill that got out of my committee last year 15-5. So if we can do it on criminal justice reform, we can do it on DACA.
So finally, Senator, you are chairman, of course, of the Judiciary Committee, very important position. And there's an extraordinary, at least in my experience, situation right now with two nominees for judicial office, one of whom has actually made it through your committee, as I understand it, that you now have said, Mr. President, you should really pull back on those nominations because things have come to light that are deeply disturbing about these two nominees. Explain your situation.
Okay, one is a nominee for the state of Texas, McAteer. He hasn't, the White House hasn't even sent them up here, but there's things that he has said that are very controversial. That's going to keep him from getting a majority of the United States Senate. Why bother? I've told the White House about that through my staff a long time before I was interviewed yesterday on the subject, and I made news on it, so they knew my feeling ahead of time. In regard to the other one, it was a case of them coming through our committee, getting voted out of committee, probably on a party line vote, now on the floor, so it'll be up to Leader McConnell if he wants to bring him up. But there's a whole lot of new information of things he has said that are very controversial, that question his judgment, and now probably that probably will not get through the United States Senate. But that's McConnell's decision. The other one is the president's decision. I'm just giving my advice as I see controversy. We need to spend our time on 147 vacancies in the judicial system and not be messing around with people that are going to be controversial.
Does it raise questions in your mind? You have a lot of experience with this. Does it raise questions in your mind about the vetting process for these candidates? Because, as you say, some of the things that have been said by these two gentlemen have been pretty remarkable.
I suppose, first of all, let me tell you, something comes up here from the White House, it's 3 or 4 weeks before it ever gets on the agenda. So there's plenty of time to do vetting, and it does it well. And particularly in things that I can't talk about that we have material on, there's a lot of information in there, but I don't know how you can be guaranteed of everything being made public. But we do have, with social networking and with the ability of people to communicate very easily now, it's easy for somebody to forget something. Maybe they wanted to hide something, but eventually you're going to have transparency if it's really bad.